Apple just replaced its greatest CEO with someone who has never run a company. Former head of hardware engineering, John Ternus, is now Apple's new CEO. He was the mastermind behind the iPad, AirPods, Apple Silicon, and the MacBook Neo. Genuinely one of the best minds on the planet, and the tech world is beyond thrilled. But while everyone is looking at his hardware wins, they're missing the $4 trillion trap Tim Cook just walked them into. Because Apple's future isn't about better MacBooks. It's a three-front war that hardware alone cannot win. Siri is so broken, they're paying Google $1 billion a year to fix it. Their App Store is under attack from regulators on 3 different continents. And the 15-year relationship Tim Cook built with China is a geopolitical time bomb. So why would Apple appoint a hardware guy to fight a software and a political war? Because 3 years ago, Tim Cook made a decision that tells you everything about why he picked Ternus. In 2001, Ternus found himself at a supplier facility. It's past midnight, magnifying glass in hand, arguing with the supplier over a tiny detail on a screw that no customer would ever see. That level of obsession is exactly why Cook picked him, and it produced some of the most important products Apple has ever made. He pushed Apple to build iPadOS. He led the shift to Apple Silicon, saving Apple over $7 billion a year in chip costs alone, and he was the brains behind MacBook Neo, Apple's most affordable laptop ever. On paper, Cook couldn't have picked anyone better. But while the tech world was celebrating, they missed something. You see, the same person behind those wins also gave us the Touch Bar, one of Apple's most hated products. Apple removed it years later like it never existed. Then there was the butterfly keyboard. It was so unreliable that Apple ended up paying $50 million to settle a class action lawsuit. And when Amazon Echo launched, Ternus dismissed smart home as not a revenue driver. And Amazon went on to launch 40 products in that space, whereas Apple launched just 3. Every single one happened because Ternus looked at a market and couldn't see past the product to the business underneath it. And that's the blind spot Cook saw 3 years ago. And he made a calculated bet. In 2021, Apple Silicon was the best chip anyone had put in a laptop. Cook looked at that and thought, hardware is the future, and that if you build devices, good people would never want to leave. So he picked the most obsessive hardware guy he had, announced it as the perfect succession, and stepped aside. Problem is, in 2021, nobody had heard of ChatGPT, but by 2026, Google, Microsoft, and Meta are spending a combined $500 billion a year building their own AI. I mean, Cook's hardware bet made sense in 2021. But the apple Cook handed Ternus in 2026 is a very different one. And somewhere along the way, Cook realized it too. Because if he was so confident in Ternus, why didn't he fully leave? Because what Cook built isn't just a tech company, it's closer to a nation state. Think about what Cook actually did in 15 years. Since he took over, stock went up nearly 1,900%. And Apple was the first company in history to hit $3 trillion. When Cook started, services revenue was just $9 billion a year. Today, it's around $109 billion. And here's why that matters. Apple's hardware margins make up about 38.7%, and their service margins are around 75%. And Ternus spent 25 years perfecting the 38 part of the business, whereas the 75% part is what keeps the whole thing alive. But the money is only half the story. In 2016, when Chinese regulators threatened to shut down Apple services in China, Cook flew to the Chinese leadership compound and signed a secret $275 billion deal to keep Apple's access intact. That's the kind of relationship Cook spent 15 years building. And it was not just in China. He personally met EU antitrust chiefs when Brussels came after the App Store. And he also called Trump directly when tariffs threatened iPhone prices. He flew to Beijing 3 times in a single year just to keep the supply chain intact. I mean, Ternus has never done any of it. So on April 20th, 2026, the same day Cook announced he was stepping down, Apple made a second announcement that most people completely missed. Cook wasn't fully leaving. He was staying on as executive chairman, specifically, and this is Apple's exact language, engage with policymakers around the world. The outgoing CEO felt the need to keep half his old job because his replacement couldn't do all of it. And as one report put it, Ternus inherits the products, Cook keeps Brussels. But here's the terrifying part. The Cook safety net only covers the politics. It doesn't cover what's actually coming. You see, Apple's AI is so far behind, they're now paying Google nearly $1 billion a year just to keep Siri alive. Here's how bad it got. At WWDC 2024, Apple promised a completely new Siri, personal context, on-screen awareness, and deep app control. They marketed it on every iPhone 16 they sold. 2 years later, none of those 3 features have been shipped. Apple got hit with a $250 million lawsuit for false advertising, and internally, executives were calling these delays ugly and embarrassing. And here's why that matters beyond just embarrassment. People don't stay in Apple's ecosystem because of the hardware. They stay because everything just works together. The moment that stops being true, the moment a competitor's AI is genuinely better, people start leaving. And right now, Google, Microsoft, and Meta are spending nearly $500 billion a year on AI this year alone. And Apple is spending just $14 billion. So how exactly is Ternus supposed to close that gap? Because the AI crisis is just the first problem. Remember that $109 billion services machine Cook spent 15 years building? Regulators are tearing it apart. The EU fined Apple 1.8 billion euros in 2024 and another 500 million euros in 2025. If the 30% App Store cuts gets reduced globally, Apple loses between $10 to $30 billion in annual revenue. The most profitable part of Apple's business is under attack on 3 continents simultaneously, and Cook spent 15 years managing these relationships personally, and Ternus has never done any of it. Then there's China. 74% of iPhones are still assembled there, and Apple's just come from TSMC in Taiwan, sitting right in the crossfire of the US-China trade war. I mean, Ternus wants to move manufacturing to India, Vietnam, and anywhere but China, but the precision that goes into every Apple product, the tolerances, the materials, the scale, that took decades to build in China. You can't just pick it up and move it overnight. And if Ternus gets it wrong, the products suffer. You know, the very thing he built his reputation on. Okay, let's say Cook does cover the diplomacy and the politics, but research shows that when outgoing CEOs stay on as executive chairmen, 54% of those companies underperform. So what does Apple actually look like under Ternus? I think there are 2 possible outcomes. First, Ternus does what nobody expects. He's already told Apple employees that they're about to change the world again. The pipeline definitely backs that up. The folding iPhone launches in September 2026, his first keynote as CEO. I mean, literally a phone that folds, crease-free design, and something Apple has genuinely never done before. Then there's smart glasses with cameras built in, AI AirPods that can see everything that you're looking at, and a new home device. Wedbush estimates that this pipeline could generate $15 billion in new annual revenue. And here's what the critics are missing about Ternus. Every time he's been wrong, he's admitted it and fixed it. I mean, look at it. Touch bar, butterfly keyboard, smart home. He's owned the failures, course-corrected, and moved on. If he brings the same instinct to the CEO role, Apple enters a new hardware renaissance nobody saw coming. But the second version is much harder to watch. The AI gaps keep widening. Needham analysts estimate Apple is 2 to 3 years behind on AI, and that lag, in their words, could have existential risk. App Store comes under more pressure, the upgrade cycle keeps slowing down. I mean, right now, the average iPhone replacement cycle is now 4.2 years. People replace phones because batteries died, not because Siri got smarter. And a hardware-focused CEO running a services and AI company has never ended well in the history of tech. So, did Apple make a $4 trillion mistake? Drop it in the comments below. I want to know what you guys think. And if you want to see what happens when a tech giant bets on everything on a product nobody asked for, I broke down Mark Zuckerberg's $88 billion mistake right here. Click and watch that video. Subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.